A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back once again to video games that are totally awesome. So, what I got to talk about for this instance is Dead Island 2. Yeah, if you remember when I talked about Dead Island Part 1 just yesterday, then you'll definitely want to hear what I have to say about Dead Island 2. It is phenomenal. It's probably the best zombie game I might have ever played. At least up until when I got my fix again with Dead Island Deluxe Remaster. They certainly did a great job at giving us newer things to work with in this remake of the original, although because it's a deluxe remaster, there couldn't have been that much more that they had made changes to. But either way you look at it though, Dead Island 2 goes way beyond the normal perspective of things. If you thought that Dead Rising did an incredible job at giving us the combo weapons, the massive zombie slaughtering, and unique storylines, and cool jokes by Frank West, well, take a look at what Dead Island 2 has. Almost right from the get-go, the storyline begins with a unique beach party taking place in Los Angeles, California. But, unfortunately, a large network of problems occur, and the military would eventually force a lot of people to evacuate from LA and eventually quarantine the city. Because 15 years after the Bonnoy incident took place, a newer and more powerful outbreak has occurred. The undead start to rise even more exponentially than with Bonnoy, and worse is that so many people end up dying almost right from the get-go. We only get to see a group of 6 get on board an airplane. Unfortunately though, this group of 6, which includes the likes of Bruno, Carla, Danny, Ryan, Amy, and Jacob. These 6 people have their own unique occupations like retail worker, firefighter, stuntsman, and they then have their own unique abilities, which correlates to their own occupation. With Ryan, for instance, he tends to be a lot on the stronger side, but not as fast moving. And with Jacob, you can expect him to be a bit more on the agile side and also take a lot more damage due to him being the stuntsman. But by all accounts, with each of these guys, they're not only unique characters, but they have their own unique personalities. And they also have a variety of different things for us to work with. So if you happen to have certain preferences on what you like do you want more money? Do you want more strength? Do you want more damage? Do you want more speed? Do you want more evasive action, agility? Do you want more damage control or durability? Well, you'll have a good variety of characters to work with, because all 6 of them have their own share of unique benefactors. But in the airplane that they're on, at the same time that we're picking our character, there unfortunately comes a point in which that the infection unfortunately gets a hold of the plane crew, and it eventually causes, you guessed it, a plane crash. While our 6 characters that we saw earlier, from Jacob to Ryan, actually make it out of there alive in one piece, they unfortunately don't quite end up in the same area because the plane had broken itself apart in different pieces. But it's when we get out of the plane that we actually get to have our first chance to tackle any of the undead. We get to find weapons close by, and as the dead start to attack, we fight back with a single slash. And that is a pretty bad to the bone move right there. But it gets even better though, because even after all this nonsense had come around, the real mystery is trying to regroup and eventually find our way back to civilization. Hopefully, a part of civilization that's not overrun. With these 6 characters in mind, the co-op part can be a little bit difficult to work with here. Trying to incorporate 6 players onto the same screen seems kind of difficult to pull off. Maybe not that realistic either. So maybe for some people out there, they would intend on flying solo. That's basically what I did in my 15 hours of gameplay that I put through all together. In any case though, what eventually happens is that there are certain things that we'd have to deal with first. Because first off, with the infected that somehow ended up on board the plane, the government had to shoot it down, and that was why it ended up crashing in the first place. Well, there eventually comes to a survivor known as Emma Jaunt, whom essentially them decides to shelter. Even on the faces of so-called infection that has taken place, we still get to have assistance come by from this Hannah person. And while not everything might seem all that good at the moment, well, a mansion becomes the next location. Well, this mansion, which Emma Jaunt herself has ownership of and lives in at the moment, essentially is going to act as the temporary home base. In which case, that we get to see Sam B. Yup, the same Sam B that we saw earlier. Remember the first game? That was one of the playable characters. And now Sam B becomes a special guest star, pretty much. And because Emma is seen as an ex by Sam B, well, the main thing that we have to do is, well, we have to work on finding a way to get Emma out of the city. And while this group, which are dubbed the Slayers, with 6 characters overall, like I said, we have a lot of things to work with. We have our main quests, which relate to the mansion. We have various things to work around here and there, some side quests that pop up, some things that we get to do along the way just as well, like work out which weapons we're going to use to fight the zombies, and of course, the creative function. Like I said, the way that they were able to create their own customized heavy weaponry in Dead Island 2 is even more impressively well constructed. It's just perfect. Yep. I would not have figured that I would go ahead and just say it out of the blue, but here I am. Went ahead and did it. In any case, though, with our main story that still goes on with the mansion and whatnot, a man known as Dr. Reuben Reed apparently has a chat with them on the radio that they managed to find. Well, this evac center, while the radio was the only thing left that they had to use to find some intel, Santa Monica is now a place that we need to go to. A so-called safe haven that is out there. Well, the thing is that this place in Santa Monica, which eventually turns out to be a giant hotel in which that Reuben himself has situated in, well, even though there was some doubt from Sam, our Slayers actually go there anyways. Well, while Santa Monica unfortunately has had some trouble with it, including a giant mass, a so-called growth that goes around spreading all throughout the city itself. And Santa Monica itself does unfortunately end up at the epicenter of this spreading. These giant sort of tumor-like masses that form around, and the radioactive waste, just woof. Talk about it being a pretty rough time for Californians in Santa Monica right now. Even Dr. Reed himself. Well, while there unfortunately does come to be a few complications along the way, we do make our way over there. There's even other survivors around the area, including a person known as Lola, but even she is more than testing to find out if these Slayers are truly worth anything. A pit full of zombies encourages some rage to come around. But let's be real here. By this point in time, each of our characters have their own unique advantages. They might have their ways in the faces of combat based on speed, durability, evasion tactics, defense, and offense. But after we get out of this pit and after we get out of all this other nonsense that takes place, especially with the hotel that we go through and the pool that we need to secure, well, we eventually do get to Dr. Reed himself. Reed intends to use the immunity of the Slayers themselves in order to formulate a cure for this massive problem going on in LA, which, by the way, is now referred to as Hell A. Quite funny, if you ask me. There's a lot of comedic stuff that goes around in Dead Island 2 compared to the first game, in which the comedy wasn't as amazing. But let's be real, we have a lot of the laughs that come around nowadays. But let's be real here. The military, unfortunately, has a special catch for the Slayers. In order for them to have their immunity extracted, their DNA to be formed into a cure that can be used to repel the zombie crisis, they need to have proof of immunity. And this alone is quite a massive quest. This ensures that the Slayers end up traveling to various areas here and there and completing certain other quests before they're even allowed to have their own immunity certifications met. And when they do finally get to have their DNA put into a special vial, which will then be delivered to Dr. Reed, well, we eventually do get some more problems here and there. Some problems that do develop within the basis of infection. Some characters whom unfortunately end up infected themselves. But I will say that probably one of the biggest problems of this game that I happen to find here is that, well, it's fair to say that the challenge in this game is pretty high. And it's encouraging that they do allow for us to have higher challenge in these games. With Dead Island, as well as the Dying Light duology, I found that Techland and Deep Silver were able to incorporate a large amount of challenge with this first-person combat system, swiping left and right. Of course they're going to have a lot of things for us to work with. Why wouldn't they? I'd say the main problem that I find with it, though, is that sometimes it gets a bit unfair in certain ways. With Dead Island 2, I find little to no exception on that, and that's probably a big weakness of it. That keeps it from being as perfect as I've claimed it to be. But really, the comedy, creativity function in weaponry, variety in side quests, as well as with the storyline, and not to mention, just the fact that we're playing as 6 unique characters, that alone spreads around the variety in terms of statistics as well as their background. And the fact that they even give us some pretty unique backstories to help us get to know them better. I especially like how Ryan's backstory was that he worked at a nightclub and had himself his time as a firefighter. But well, the real big trouble seems to take place at a local carnival. This pier in which that it supposedly allows for a multitude of possibilities to take place. I mean, we could rig the Ferris wheel, we could rig the bumper cars. I mean, just the variety in the usage of the carnival rides as traps for the zombies, electrifying them, burning them, or catapulting them up and out of sight, is really a clever move. Imagine if Dead Rising did that. I mean, with Dead Rising 4, for instance, they could have had that sort of variety take place in a pretty unique way. But I guess that just didn't really make the cut. With Dead Island 2, they were able to execute it so flawlessly that it's hard for me to ignore these pressing matters. But what I really want to point out here is that by the end of the game, Dead Island 2, by this point, has racked in a lot of weaponry, a lot of dialogue, a lot of traveling to locations all over the state of California, not just in LA, but also Santa Monica and other neighboring communities and cities. The real big ending of this game here is that even with the efforts of Dr. Reed, and even with all the things that had happened with good old Sam B, well, the thing is, Newman Blood apparently was put into the likes of Tisha. Well, this thing known as pathogen HK, which is revealed to be the root cause of the zombie outbreak itself, this disease, which apparently had a cure the whole time. The thing is, Newman Blood was put into Tisha's body. The remedy itself was found in her own body this whole time, and that her own kind, her own father, he essentially turned into a massive creature. And while the lives had been saved with the cure itself, he unfortunately doesn't make it. This Newman, he tends to act very much like a cultist. Well, anomalies or puppets of the autophage, Godblood, a lot of the stuff that he's known to say. It all boils down to a massive boss fight in the end, in which case it really does bring out the challenge. And I will say I've struggled at this point, many times over. And it's just crazy. The challenge alone in this game really gets you thinking here. But it does actually circumvent the main atrocity to this game, other than the massive challenge that comes around. It's very short. I beat the game in nearly 15 hours. I mean, think about it. I spent a little more than that with the first game. And even more so than with the usage of the Ryder storyline, which added another several hours to the overall gameplay itself, nearly doubling the amount of hours that this game offers. So, the main game itself, Dead Island 2, comes out to an average of around 15 hours, depending on what you do here and there. I mean, it's one thing to go from LA to an airplane crashes, then going through Santa Monica, a military zone, and eventually some tunnels and sewers, and eventually laboratories that are located in various spots, and many other different places. But what I really am trying to find out here is, why would they try to make the game so much more difficult just because of how short it is in runtime from start to finish? Oh, but you know what though? I did hear about a little something known as HAUS. H-A-U-S. That of which is actually more of a DLC or side story expansion pack. So, yeah, just to get more hours of the game, you have to pay more money for it. A unique way to make extra cash, right? In the video game industry, it's happened a lot now. Leading us to wonder, what's the point of even having to spend extra money just for pieces that we could have just gotten with the game itself? I mean, this is why I usually go for the deluxe or ultimate edition of games, just because I want everything to be included and not just for them to tease us with extra material by forcing us to spend more money for it. Typically, if we're going to get our hands on a big game, we could just spend over $100 on the full edition and get everything with it, including the DLCs and the season passes that come with it. Well, in the end, I feel like that these blunders are more or less just minority in comparison to all the other things that I've mentioned already. The comedy in this game is ramped up. We have unique characters to play with, giving us the choice of whom do we want with the best attributes possible. And more so, with the weapons, with everything else, Dead Island 2 is certainly one of the best video game sequels ever. No doubt about it. But had it been for these issues being resolved, like if they had more hours for us to play around with more side quests and more other things and more places to visit, then maybe I would probably cut some slack from this. And the same thing could probably go with the challenge. They could make it a little less difficult in most ways. Especially at one part which I'm trying to enter a building, and holy crap. One major part of the story, and I gotta defeat some tanks, basically. Brutes that essentially carry large weapons with them. So, final scoring of Dead Island 2, of all the things that I would have had to say about it, 9.5 out of 10.1. So, even better than with the first game. But apart from some of these problems that I've addressed earlier, they are in fact very, very minor in comparison to all the major pieces that make this game such a big masterpiece in and of itself. I considered it to be top 5 best games of 2023, up there with other games, like The Crew Motorfest and Resident Evil 4 Remake. But these, of course, were different things that I've talked about over the years. And up until this point, we're going to have a lot more to discuss. Throughout the rest of this week, I hope to talk about some more zombie-related games here and there. But until that happens, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side for more.